Future of Money, Governance, and the Law is hosted by the Government Blockchain Association, a worldwide community to connect, communicate, and collaborate. This show is produced by Podtex. To learn more and how to host your own show, go to www.podtex.com. Podtechs. Podtex, your partners in podcasting.
Hi, my name is Gerard Dache, and I'm the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. I am just thrilled that we've got Venkat Kodumundi with us today. He's with CGI. And Venkat, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell our audience a little bit about who you are, and we'll get started.
Hey, Gerard. Thanks for the intro. My name is Venkat Kodumundi. I run CGI's US blockchain practice and responsible for expanding and breaking into the business of blockchain for across the U.S. for commercial, state, and local government.
So, Venkat, I've seen you everywhere. Every time there's a major event, I see you speaking. So tell us a little bit about your story. How'd you get started in this whole blockchain thing?
Absolutely, Gerard. Thanks. Let's see. I have a master's and a bachelor's degree in computer science, and in my master's, I actually specialized and focused on system integration. About 2.5 years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago, the company that I was working for was bidding for a proposal in the U.S. government for blockchain. It was a blockchain proposal, and one of the major vendors of a blockchain platform reached out to us. We're a small company, and said, "You guys should bid to this." That's when I actually heard what blockchain was, and when I started reading, I realized that, where was I this all along? Because with my background in system integration, it was just an obvious choice of getting into blockchain. Since then, I actually started building my own application. I'm the kind of guy who has to get my hands dirty in order for me to understand how it works. So since then, I've been building my own application. I built my own couple of applications, one on the business side and one on the more of the tokenization, the cryptocurrency side, just to learn how things work. And then quickly started architecting, designing blockchain solutions for the industry. That's kind of how I got into blockchain.
Now, you said you were working for a small company, but you don't work for a small company now, right?
No, I don't. I moved on, brought my blockchain knowledge with me when I moved to CGI, where I've been in CGI for the past 2 years, and kind of helping CGI build the blockchain expertise and slowly build on helping our customers build blockchain solutions.
Excellent. Well, I want to circle back around to that in a minute, but tell me about these 2 or 3 applications you built early on. Talk us through that thing, because I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. So one was the simpler one was I built my own token just to learn how Ethereum works and how the cryptocurrency works, and deployed it to the testnet of Ethereum. Which has kind of got me into the whole Solidity coding and tokenization model, and how the tokenization industry works, and how it kind of interacts with the fiat currency and so on and so forth. That was one. And the second one I built it was more like a simple document management, document control system across organizational boundaries. On when one organization changes some information in a document, let's say it's a contract, how it affects and how it gets validated across other organizations that have the need to know and need to understand the changes and accept the changes and validate those changes. So it was a simple 2-node network that I built.
And then was there a third one?
No, these were the only 2 that I built over the years myself. And the third one, and the third, fourth, and fifth one, now I'm getting into more business-friendly, business-oriented for CGI.
Gotcha. Okay, so I got a question. You spent some time doing the tokenization on the Ethereum network. And when people talk about, we're the Government Blockchain Association, so people talk about enterprise systems, a lot of times they're looking at private permissioned blockchain. And the Ethereum stack is a little bit more decentralized. What's your thoughts in terms of whether or not the government can actually use more of a decentralized system, or are they kind of locked into more of a permissioned blockchain? What's your general thoughts on that?
There's 2 sides to the story, right? I'm fully on board with the fact that government can use blockchain to do their business in a better way, and can benefit out of using the blockchain. And I see value in both the more permissionless decentralized ledger DLT and more permission closed network DLT can both benefit the government. On one side, the concept of citizen services that the government provides, which is the core nature of the government itself, whether it's federal government or state government and our local governments. A lot of those citizen services, whether it is individual citizens or corporate citizens, kind of tend to fall into more permission piece. For example, the food stamps would be a great example where the government can control who gets the money and how the money gets spent, and so on and so forth. And there's immediate access to the details that government lacks today. Another example would be, when it comes to grants, government providing grants, there's a lot of reporting requirements that the government has, and they cannot satisfy those requirements today, which blockchain can help. Let's now talk about the other side, which is the more permissionless open network. I think that's where the currency, the financial aspect comes into play. I think the market at some point will go into digital currency that's sitting on the blockchain as opposed to the fiat currency. There's also the concept of identity services, identity management. I think can benefit to be in being on a somewhat permissionless network. Voting is another aspect that can benefit from being on a permissionless network.
That's awesome. You mentioned the food stamps program. Are you familiar with the UN program that they did with the Syrian refugees?
I am not familiar with the UN program, although I am familiar with the work that was being done by the city of Manchester in UK, where the food stamps was provided on a blockchain network.
Right. So that I think you're totally right. I mean, having programs like that in a permissioned space, and then still having space for the permissionless is exciting. We at GBA, I don't know if you know this or not. You might have seen some of the stuff that we've done. We have a GBA token project, and we're looking at launching a token which is a cross-blockchain platform. Right. So the token can reside on any blockchain, and it's a cross-blockchain. So we're pretty excited about that. Right. So the work that you're doing now at CGI, tell us a little bit about how you went from working at this small company where you were working on some of these projects to coming over to CGI, and tell us about some of the work you're doing with CGI.
Yeah. So like any consulting service company, it took some time to get to where I am now. especially with consulting companies, tend to be skeptical about a new technology and the benefits of the new technology that they provide, unless we show them the value. So I did recently win a contract with one of the federal governments providing a blockchain solution for the federal government agency in the Intel space. And that kind of changed the trajectory for my company as well as for me, to a positive side of the business, where blockchain can actually solve a lot of government issues. In addition to that, I'm working on some state government welfare services programs and projects where I'm building some internally funded proof of concepts that can be shown to state governments, where welfare can be done on a blockchain in a more streamlined and efficient fashion that reduces cost and increases the efficiency of the process itself that the state government follows to maintain their welfare services. In addition to which, it reduces risk, and it reduces the time to reconcile information as it flows through a blockchain. I'm working on those two at a minimum at this point. In addition to that, I'm working on a few things on the supply chain industry, which kind of falls out of the government spectrum at this point. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Sure.
Sorry, it would help if I took my mic off of mute. That's amazing. Intelligence, state welfare program, supply chain. I mean, that's a pretty wide sort of set of factors. A lot of folks have tried to kind of penetrate the federal market or the government market with blockchain solutions. I imagine they get a lot of pushback, right? As you've been approaching different government entities about blockchain solutions, what's some of the resistance that you have encountered? What's the pitch that you've been giving them in terms of why it would be a good idea, and what kind of resistance have you been having with government agencies and the use of blockchain?
So when I did my MBA, the biggest thing I got out of my my MBA degree was is when it comes to marketing, you always have to remember the term WIFM. What's in it for me? So that's how I've been approaching the blockchain sales or market in the government sector. What are the benefits? What are the business benefits that blockchain solution would provide for a particular problem? For example, the state services work that I'm working on. The biggest problem that they are facing right now is reconciliation of the funds and payments after the fact. So putting it on a blockchain where the reconciliation sort of happens at real time, and the rules that govern the approval of the money transfer is done instantaneously, you pretty much get rid of the concept of reconciliation at that point. So you go into it knowing what problems that the customer is facing for a given application, given space, and then work backwards from there to show them the value, the business value that the blockchain solution provides. Sometimes it may benefit to not even talk to them about blockchain to start with, but start talking to them about the problem that they're facing. And then, by the way, there is a solution that can solve this problem. So that's one aspect that that are used to approach government customers. The second aspect that I'm seeing, which is a big issue or a concern, is as soon as we say the term blockchain, the first thing that comes to the customer's mind is cryptocurrency and the negative connotation that the current news media has given on cryptocurrency. It I'm seeing that a lot more now than before, where it takes quite a bit of education on our part to educate the customers on no, it's not Bitcoin cryptocurrency. There's a lot more to blockchain than just cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. So I go in by saying I'll actually start by saying um, Bitcoin / cryptocurrency is blockchain, but blockchain is not just Bitcoin cryptocurrency. So it's a combination of education, combination of with him, what's in it for me, is kind of where I see uh, the way to take the government customers forward. But at the same time, one of the concerns is cryptocurrency. Will they tie blockchain to cryptocurrency? Second concern is, it's a new technology. I don't want to get into the new technology until it's proven. The third concern that I see is the moment you talk about blockchain. Let's try blockchain. In my organization, I have multiple databases, and I have a hard time reconciling. But that's not really a true use case for blockchain. So it's also the education factor of what is the true use case for blockchain. In addition to and then comes the problem of, oh, wait a minute, I have to share my data with the other organization, but that's going to be on the blockchain, but I'll lose control, or it won't be secure anymore. So those are some of the concerns and issues that I'm seeing that we need to get past before actually sitting down and doing a blockchain solution.
Wow, that's awesome. A lot of the use cases you were talking about, we've got working groups that are working on stuff like supply chain. Our supply chain working group, along with I think Florida, Miami specifically, is working on a blockchain platform, right? That essentially would tie together the rail companies, the shipping companies, the airports, and the trains, or no, the trucking companies together on a blockchain. And I know that we're looking at doing some training for the intelligence community on that, and our budget accounting and traceability working group is also looking at stuff similar to the welfare programs. But these are just absolutely great use cases. I really like what you said about the whole helping governments understand what the right use cases are, because boy, that is such a huge need right now. Now, let me ask you this. I want to talk about cryptocurrency for a second, because Sandy, our good friend over in Washington, I've been told by a lot of people in government, talk to me about blockchain, but don't talk to me about cryptocurrencies, right? And then oftentimes when they say blockchain, what they really mean is a distributed database, right? So there's all kinds of misunderstandings there. But I believe, especially in light of what Facebook's done, at least recently with Libra and Calibra, and as I look at the folks that are coming to us asking us for information, and right, FBI and FinCEN and IRS and Treasury, there's a huge demand, there's a huge need for folks in government to understand both cryptocurrency and blockchain. Are you in the place right now where you pretty much just talk to folks in government about blockchain? Do you try to introduce to them the concept of cryptocurrency and tokenization? Where do you see the government is right now in terms of their ability or willingness to talk about both sides of the coin, pardon the expression, as opposed to just wanting to talk about blockchain?
Yeah, so I don't think the government is there yet to talk about cryptocurrency, although um, uh, one of the great use cases for a cryptocurrency model in blockchain would be the concept of uh, aid to foreign countries, or uh, the diaspora from one country in the U.S. helping their members in back home in some sort of a automated fashion through blockchain, uh, and through tokenization. When we cross national boundaries. So there are very good benefits and use cases for the cryptocurrency aspect, but I don't think the government is ready to talk about that yet. I think they're still talking about uh, the the more non-cryptocurrency form of solving problems using blockchain. Uh, it's more, to me, I feel that them getting into cryptocurrency world uh, is challenging a lot of norms that they're used to, and especially with the financial aspect of it, and they're not ready to talk about that.
It's interesting. Recently, we've heard a couple reports about, I think Baltimore was one city, and I think there was another city in South Florida that was hacked, and the hackers demanded payment in I believe Bitcoin, and so the city councils had to vote on whether or not they were going to pay the ransom in cryptocurrency, right? And I know that Ohio and a couple other states are looking at accepting cryptocurrency as payment for taxes. So I think that as we move forward, I think the government is definitely not going to want to talk about cryptocurrency, but I kind of get the feeling that they're going to get dragged into it, right? I don't think Congress wanted to have that conversation with Facebook, right? But I think they're getting dragged into it. Do you see sort of the same thing, that they may not want to have the conversation, but they may get pulled into it?
No, I totally agree with that. Let's look at SEC, right? So they're coming down so hard on the so-called token market companies, and they've issued guidances on how they're going to treat cryptocurrency. IRS has issued guidance on how they're going to treat cryptocurrency in connection to taxes. They're going to come after people who own bitcoins to collect taxes from them. So you're absolutely right in the fact that they are going to be dragged into it, like it or not. Now, I want to go a little bit backward in time. Europe, when the euro zone was formed, when EU was formed, they actually tried digitizing the euro, the currency. In fact, initially when EU was formed, they were not even considering um, uh, um, paper currency. They were only considering digital currency. It's just sad that cryptocurrency and the blockchain-based tokenization didn't exist at that time. Otherwise, that would have been a great way to go. And history is history speaks for itself. That aspect was dropped, and EU had to come out with the paper-based euros to move forward. Yeah.
So I definitely want to circle back to that. There's one thing I want to capture before we move too much further, but I want to come back to banking and some of those systems, because you're working on a banking system now, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk about that in depth, but let me just kind of hit, before we move on to banking, I want to go back to sort of where government is. So we talked about sort of cryptocurrency in terms of they don't want to have that conversation, but they're likely to get dragged into it. With respect to, let's go back to the technology side. A lot of times when you talk to folks about blockchain, what they're really talking about just a distributed ledger or distributed database, right? And so, what's your thought process on whether the government is really ready to embrace blockchain in terms of making sharing data and I know earlier you said that those are some of the resistances, but the whole understanding of, gosh, I put data on a public blockchain, I can't do that, and I lose control. Do you think the government's ready for that paradigm shift? And if so, or if not, how long do you think that kind of a paradigm shift will take? What are your thoughts in terms of the government's readiness and ability to actually implement some of these technologies?
So I think they are ready now. There are pockets that are actually not only ready, they are implementing, at least at a proof of concept model. They are implementing a solution. In fact, the work that we are doing for the government exactly hits the secure data sharing problem at its core. The solution that we are building allows for an authorized, authority-based sharing of data and the underlying auditing associated with the authorization. So the short answer is they're ready, they're there, we're doing it, and you're going to see more and more of that in the near future.
Okay, great. Well, that takes us right into, you guys are working on banking solutions. I know at the event that we have coming up September 14th and 15th of 2019, we have an event called the Future of Money Governance and the Law right outside of Washington, D.C. And you're going to be presenting some technology about using blockchain in the financial services banking capacity. You want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you'll be presenting?
Yeah. We, CGI, there are a couple of things I want to touch on. One thing before going to the banking sector, we have built across the globe. CGI has built. My colleague members have built other blockchain solutions in various industries that we can bring to bear as needed. Having said that, CGI has an intellectual property or a product that we own called Trade 360, which about 20 of the world's largest banks use today to help the banks with their trade, all the workflows and all the processes, policies associated with trade, and customers that require trade, the bank's customers that require trade, that they bank that bank with them. For example, Bank of Montreal is a bank that is our customer, one of our customers, and we recently ANZ Bank is one of our customers also. And the idea is their customers who do trading, who do supply chain, where they buy products from other countries or they sell products to other countries. All those trade-related, the word I want to use is workflow, is managed by this Trade 360 application. It's a toolbox for the banks to use. What we have been doing is we have been blockchain enabling that toolbox. And what we have done and what we're going to show is when a bank's customer wants to go and procure, let's say a manufacturing customer wants to go procure large amount of inventory for one of their raw materials and ingredients, and they need the word I'm looking for. They need financing to go purchase it. So they go to the bank and say, "Give me a letter of credit that I'm good for, that I can go give it to my vendor or provider, so that I can purchase this and move forward with my inventory." And move forward with my manufacturing process. So what we have done is we have kind of brought the bank, the customer of the bank together on a blockchain with the bank of the vendor and the vendor themselves on a blockchain network, where the letter of credit information is shared across on a ledger, the rules that both the banks have to be able to front the money, and the manufacturer and the vendor has to be able to send and receive inventory, is all managed and controlled by the blockchain, which is the use case that we intend to show at the event.
Well, that's awesome, and I don't know if you know this or not, but we're going to be we're going to make that we're going to be recording your demonstration. We're going to make it available to all the participants. So even though we've got a bunch of tracks going, all the participants will be able to watch a video of all the other tracks. So you'll have an opportunity to demonstrate that, and also we're going to make your demonstration available to the global community as well, because it'll be broadcast as part of a virtual conference. So that's going to be awesome. What technology is what platform is your blockchain system built
on? We partnered with R3 Corda to build this.
Okay.
For the Trade 360.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening with blockchain in the banking sector? Because there's a lot of things happening there. In fact, that's going to be a major track during our conference. You want to share a little bit, central banks, retail banks, a little bit about what they're doing?
Wow. My knowledge on the banking industry is limited to, so I'm going to caveat what I'm going to say with two assumptions. One is limited to the, in association with the intellectual property or products that we CGI sell. And the second part is the things that I've learned over by reading or by applying my own brain to how things can work. Having said that, let's talk a little bit about some of the use cases that we can think of that the banking industry can benefit out of. Clearly, trade is one. Second is interbank transfer is a big component that blockchain can help. Third is KYC, know your customer aspect of the identity management. There's a huge play in the banking industry, not just in the banking industry, but any industry that uses the concept of KYC to kind of obtain, manage, and ensure their customers are well provided for, and ensure reduction in fraud. So KYC is going to play a big role, and blockchain is going to play a big role in that aspect. The last aspect, at least that comes to my mind, is the AML, anti-money laundering, and the rules and regulations associated with anti-money laundering. That's an area that I think that's going to improve by using blockchain. Banking industry in general has a lot of regulations that it needs to comply to. So using blockchain will help in them complying to these mondo amount of regulations. For example, they have to provide every fraud that they detect out of, whether it's AML policies or out of KYC policies. They have to submit a SAR report to the government as part of the Dodd-Frank regulations, at least in the US. I think using a blockchain solution will benefit not only the bank in complying with these regulations in a more faster and more accurate way. It helps the government keep tab on these banks as it happens and not after the fact.
Right, and then also with the whole issue of reconciliation, right? Because my understanding is as the banks use these technologies, they can reconcile faster, transactions can happen faster, and they reduce their costs significantly. Is that your understanding?
That's absolutely my understanding. In fact, that is the if you go back a little bit earlier to my discussion, we talked about the work that we're doing for a state government, at least as a POC, on behalf of a state government, I should say, as a POC. The reconciliation is the primary reason why we're doing this. So if you take that and apply it to the banking industry, absolutely.
So I do know that there's a couple networks of banks, retail banks. I think R3 has one of the retails. I don't know if it was Chase or JP Morgan, I think, is involved in one of the other networks. And each one has maybe 200 or 300 different banks. And they're looking at doing basically using the blockchain to do cross-border payments in real time, bypassing the central banks. And do you see that the blockchain technology basically changes the rules of the game, basically changes the way that banks interact? I mean, if retail banks can essentially do cross-border payments outside of the central banks, does this in any way change the banking system?
Yes, my gut. This is my pie in the sky prediction, right? Is just like how if you look at the utility industry, we're getting more and more into the prosumer market, right? Where you and I in our house can be both producers and consumers. And we should be able to share energy between each other without the need for a distributor. All we need is the grid and the network that connects the two of us. If you take that same example into the banking industry, if I have some money that I can lend to you, why not? I should be able to lend to you without having the need for a bank, and I should be able to follow you. And to me, the blockchain network makes it easier for us to go in that direction.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we have an energy working group that's working on that too. Chris Peoples leads that, and they're doing some amazing things. But let me come back to to what you just said. So, if I personally see the continued increase in peer-to-peer transactions, right? So, if banks can do cross-border payments without the central banks, right, and then you and I can do transactions directly with each other, right? The challenges from an AML KYC perspective and law enforcement get kind of difficult, right? So what do you see as we move forward, right? In terms of governments have a responsibility to govern; they need to know what's going on in order to do that. Yet peer-to-peer transactions will change how that happens. So how do you see that evolve?
Yeah, I see that the regulator, whether it's government or law enforcement or whoever the regulator is always and should always have a place on the blockchain network, whatever that network be. Specifically, and to me, they become a validator of the transaction, a third-party validator of the transaction to ensure the regulation is taken into account. Let me give an example, right? In the utility industry, where there's a producer and a consumer, you can't have the producer charge whatever they want to for the energy amount that they're producing. There has to be some sort of a regulation that governs what is charged, when is charged, and today that regulation is being complied by the distributor of the energy. Of the energy network or energy system. So I totally see the regulator being a participant in the network to keep an eye on where and how these participants, other participants, are behaving, and ensure that that third eye. And it all depends on how we build the smart contract or the consensus mechanism, where the regulator becomes one of the must have yes for the consensus. That's the way I see it evolving.
It's interesting because our paradigm right now for regulators is that regulators regulate large institutions, right? Like banks, energy companies, insurance companies. But in this more distributed world that we have, right, the question is, who will the regulators be regulating, right? Will they be regulating these large centralized institutions? Will they be regulating individuals, right? Will they be regulating networks, right? What's your thought in terms of how does that paradigm shift in terms of what a regulator actually even is?
Okay, so I think it's going to be all of the above. And it's going to depend on the industry. The role of the regulator is going to morph from being the policy producer to also be the policy enforcer. Maybe there's two components in the or nodes in the network. One is the policy producer, and the other one is a policy enforcer. But both have to work together. And I believe that the regulatee can be anybody. It could be a company, a corporation, or an individual. What's going to happen is the on-ramping and off-ramping of those nodes that have to participate in the network is going to become more important in those aspects, because there's going to be more rules that govern who gets on ramp into the network, who gets off ramp from the network, which is going to in turn determine who the regulators are going to regulate.
So what's fascinating about that is right now we have to have sort of these on ramps and off ramps, right? Because most people, if you think of something like Bitcoin as an example, most people will use Coinbase or some other exchange because it mirrors what a bank looks like, right? And we're still primarily a fiat currency society, so I've got to convert my fiat currency to cryptocurrency so I can get onto that on ramp, and it's at those intersections where the regulators have their visibility, right? However, if people start using, if retailers start to use cryptocurrency, then we don't necessarily need an on ramp or an off ramp. We essentially would be on the network all the time. And I'm concerned that a lot of times we take this paradigm towards regulation, looking at it how we've done things over the last 50 or 100 years, and we try to basically apply that to the future, right? But when we have people interacting with cryptocurrency ATMs, right, where or if everybody essentially can transact directly from their cell phones, it poses entirely new regulatory challenges that I don't think we've really thought through yet. What are your thoughts on
that? So I will preface by saying I'm not the expert on regulation, right? Given the regulation, I'm here to solve the problem. But having said that, I do want to agree with you in that I do agree with you in that, and which is why I kind of said that the regulation has to morph to something else, which I don't know what that something else is yet. That's one side of the story. Going back to the on-ramping and off-ramping, even to on-ramp onto Coinbases, there is some amount of regulation that happens, or some amount of check validation that happens before you get on-ramped. You can call it as check validation, you can call it as KYC, you can call it as identity verification. There is something that happens, however small it be, but that has to be in the Bitcoins of the world. The on-ramping is simply you run the algorithm and you prove that you have done your work, the proof of work. So there's some amount of rules that govern how you get on and how you get off. I don't think we can get away from that.
It's
It's a question
fascinating.
of
What's really fascinating about that? I look at the governance model for Bitcoin as an example, right? And this event that we have coming up, the reason why we call it the future of money governance and the law, and we use the word governance instead of government, is because in the Bitcoin ecosystem, there is no government, there is no regulation, right? There's consensus, and there's literally billions of dollars that are hundreds of billions of dollars that are transacted every year, and there's nobody in charge, and there's no laws or policies. There's protocol, right? And yet billions of dollars move, right, without cybersecurity audits, without all of the sort of policy, government regulation. It all works. And so one of the things that we're exploring is, as a society, can we do governance in the future based on blockchain and that paradigm, as opposed to the government that we've seen in the past, in terms of people go into a centralized location, they create laws and rules, and then through police and military, they enforce those rules, right? Whereas the beauty of how the blockchain governance model works, it's in people's best interest. It's easier and it's better to do things the right way, right? To actually do the mining and discover get the block rewards. It's easier to do that than it is to try to break or corrupt the system. And that concept of governance, right, is one that I think we haven't really fully explored. And I think that that's one of the really fascinating doorways into the future that we can look into.
That's perfect, because I think you're right. I have not spent energy and time on that yet, but that actually makes a lot more sense, because I think you're right in the sense that that's where the world is going. And as we get into more permissionless blockchain nodes, that's the right approach.
There's a company called the Blockchain Intelligence Group, right? They're a GBA member company out of Canada. They'll be at the event also. They're one of the sponsors, and they do data analytics of the Bitcoin network, basically to help law enforcement and intelligence and banking systems find bad actors like human trafficking, money laundering, things like that. But one of the things I'm really concerned about is the use of privacy coins, right? When transactions essentially are scrambled to such a degree that our current law enforcement systems and our current monitoring and regulation systems, they just can't address that. I mean, we just don't have the tools. So, that's one of the things that we're hoping that in working with banks, we can try, and regulators, we can try to get some sense in terms of where this thing is going. Where do you see the stuff that you're doing and what CGI is doing going into the future? Where are you headed from this point forward?
Yeah. So where I want to be from strategically for CGI is, I want CGI to be that blockchain ecosystem operator that sits behind a blockchain network or the business network and manages the actual technology blockchain network, maintains the blockchain network, and runs the blockchain network. What that gives me is two things. Actually, in addition to the fact that that's a space that is not well served by large-scale integrators, because I don't think small companies can have the scale to do that. One. Second thing is, the large-scale integrators that I know of, in general, tend to come from the perspective of a blockchain infrastructure or framework, where I want to be. I want to be at a place where it doesn't matter. I want to find the right blockchain network for the customer and then build it and run it and maintain it. That's my revenue model going forward. in addition to that, what that gives me is the ability to help and guide the consortium or the network or the set of customers or the founding customer in helping them with a strategy on where they should go and the marketing associated and so on and so forth. And it also helps us with having a seat at the governance of the network itself. So that's where I would like CGI to play as a strategy.
So in a minute, I'm going to ask you a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and become part of your vision for the future. But I want to go back a little bit. As you were kind of moving forward in this journey, somewhere along the way, you found out about GBA and you became involved. Can you walk us through a little bit about how you found out about GBA and potentially why you joined?
Yes. I was supporting as a consultant, technology executive for CGI on the federal side of CGI, which is where I learned about GBA. Why I joined GBA myself and why I want to support and continue to support GBA is simply because of one, well, from a personal, selfish perspective, it provides me the venue and the network to coexist and help myself expand my business side with like-minded professionals. And of course, the side aspect of it is make money for the company, but primarily learn and to give to the like-minded professionals that the GBA network provides.
Now, your boss is going to want you to say primarily make money for the company and secondarily expand your network.
Well, my boss will say that as you expand your network, making money is kind of automatic because once they know your worth, once you are in their face, who are they going to call when they think blockchain?
Right, exactly. Okay, well, that a great segue into if people want to become, part of your vision, join you, work with you. What's the best way for them to contact you? And we'll also put information in the show notes. But how can they contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on GBA Network, and I am part of the supply chain subgroup in GBA. My first name dot last name at cgi.com is the best way to reach me.
Okay, sounds good. And do you have any parting advice for people in your industry, in your peers, if they want to get in the blockchain space, if they want to kind of pursue a career in this space? What kind of advice would you give them?
The advice I would give them is exactly what I started when I started giving advice about blockchain. Think sharing, think governance, think data.
That's right. I know that when I wanted to get started in this thing, I really didn't know anything. So I just started asking myself, well, how can I help? Right? Maybe we can do a meetup, just bring some people together and just kind of roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty.
And kudos to you, Gerard. You have now formed a global organization.
It's kind of crazy if you think about it. 2018 was our first full year in operation. We now have over 15,000 people in 100 cities around the world.
Yep.
But it's because great people like you have come together and been a part of this. So I really appreciate you. I really appreciate the time you've given us today. And I hope people listening to this podcast recognize what the great work that you and CGI are doing and reach out to you if they have any opportunities for partnership.
Thank you. And
have a great day, my friend. Yeah, we'll see you in September. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
We shine the spotlight on our community. Please take a few minutes and listen to one of our global members.
I'm Gechi Aman Gaitan, the CEO of Gechi IT Solutions and co-founder of UBCS International LLC, based in USA. I am also the GBA Africa chairman and the chapter lead for GBA in Cameroon. Yeah, I came across GBA two years ago approximately, and since then I felt GBA was the kind of organization that can bring a real impact in Africa, in a sense of having the ability to connect with government and decision makers, and using working groups to provide real key insight and solution to what problems government are facing. At last, how to bring back on the table innovators and private sector actors to discuss, to see how they can be in help with government issues. Also, the membership effectiveness and flexibility in terms of cost that match the Africa ecosystem, and also the ability to decentralize the participation of all the chapters in providing their own contents was the key strategic elements that confirmed me at the beginning when I started that GBA was the key to connect Africa to the world when it comes in terms of blockchain adoption. So I'm really proud of what we did to till today. 6 chapters across the continent. Now we have a landscape of extending to 20 more chapters for the next 2 upcoming years, and we are starting having big events, including the next one upcoming 2020, the GB Africa Summit. And we really grateful on the community and the exchange, how people are ready to help to bring back their knowledge and whatever. So GBA is very, very welcome in Africa.
The Future of Money Governance and the Law is brought to you by the Government Blockchain Association, or GBA. The podcast brings together leaders in the public and private sector to discuss how government and industry can work together. We talk about how to enhance the integrity of our institutions and the quality of life for the people they serve.